Hey, real quick message before we get into the video proper. If you like this video, please do me a favor and share it around. I wouldn't normally ask this, but YouTube has recently implemented changes that straight up hide a lot of videos from people, even from subscribers. This has hurt everyone's viewership lately, but it's especially bad for smaller channels like mine that don't have a large enough base to ensure continued views and growth, so word of mouth is more important than ever. Lastly, please do every YouTuber a huge favor and make sure that restricted mode is turned off in your settings. The AI that runs it is undiscerning and overzealous. Okay, thanks for listening. On with the show. There are many conflicts that arise from the creation and consumption of art, conflicts that have plagued humanity from the first moment we learned we could depict and symbolize the world around us by etching the side of a cave with a rock or dragging the end of a stick through the dirt in the vague shape of a buffalo or our fellow humans. But one of the more interesting of these issues is the question of interpretation. When we paint a landscape or sketch a character or compose a song or write a story, we are attempting to translate the intangibility of our thoughts and understanding of something into a form other people can see and, hopefully, understand themselves. But setting aside the question of skill, this depiction is limited by our own interpretation of what we see and think. And the more abstract the concept we try to depict is, the harder it will be to communicate it through our art, and our audience will similarly be required to interpret our creation, and they will very often see something different than what we do. Even if two people look at the exact same object or think on the exact same concept, or talk to the exact same person, they each will come away with a different view and understanding than the other, and their interpretation will invariably be different. This is both the beauty and struggle of art, the way no two people can understand the same thing the exact same way. And the conflict of interpretation is something that we actually see quite clearly within the story of Clair Obscur, especially in the greatest creations of the central antagonist of the story, the Axons of Renoir. Okay, so last month when I made my channel anniversary video analysing the themes of grief and loss in Clair Obscur and a few other games, which you should definitely check out, I'm very proud of my work but the algorithm was not kind to it, I mentioned that I could talk about the Desandre family for much longer, and that's what I want to do today. Specifically, I want to talk about what Renoir's interpretations of his family say about him and how they contrast or align with who they actually are, how they grieve and, in some cases, how they see themselves. Because I think there's a fascinating amount of character analysis that can be done with understanding how one character has come to understand and interpret another, and also because the Axons are fucking cool and talking about them is fun. And as a fun little surprise, I'm actually going to be starting with the Axon and the daughter that we know the least about. So let us begin with...
Finally. Our little shadow is awake.
It may seem odd to begin with the character and her respective Axon that we know the least about, but that's actually what makes her so fascinating. Clea is a character that is most prevalent in her absence from the story, only appearing in person for about 2 minutes, but whose actions have some of the biggest impacts on the story. She's the reason the Nevrons exist, she's the reason Maelle is in the painting in the first place, and it's really thanks to her that the gommage is happening at all, as without her Nevrons sealing the chroma inside the bodies of their victims and weakening Aline, there would have been no need for the effigy of the paintress to exist at all, as it's outright stated that Renoir is no match for his wife. But it goes beyond just these, because Clea is also responsible for the existence of the canvas. She helped Verso to paint it, and spent her childhood playing inside it alongside him. But as the eldest daughter, she seemingly left it behind to focus on her responsibilities and, most recently, her war against the writers. Clea's Axon is unique in that it's the only one we never truly encounter. I mean, we can locate it, no problem. We just never fight or interact with it in any way. See, look, it's right there. Say hi, everyone. The Hauler is the only Axon that's been made past tense at the start of the game. And it's never given a title in the same way as the others are. I don't believe we're ever given its name in-game. But thanks to this painting in Renoir's atelier, we at least have a better idea of what it looked like. Mountainous in size, it's shown to be carrying an entire city on its back, nearly buckling under the weight of all it holds with it. And in a conversation with the Fading Man, which is a representation of Renoir, he sheds some light on what it represents and what he's trying to say with it. Remember,
he never paints just to paint. Everything has to have layers and layers of meaning and purpose. Everything's a lesson.
He tells us that when he spoke to his children about the nature of death and grief, Clea revealed that she wasn't afraid of dying necessarily, but is saddened by the idea that a finite life means that she can never experience everything, never find every piece of art, every story, everything the world has to offer and give it form in her workshop. Between this and Clea's characterization as a perfectionist, as well as being someone who takes charge and focuses on getting results, I think the Hauler is meant to communicate the danger of overburdening yourself. As we can see in the art made by the team, the Hauler can barely hold itself up under the massive load it carries. The sack-like carrying bag it uses ripped and stretched and quite literally bursting at the seams, its posture hunched and pained. This is clearly a message Clea has never taken to heart. But Renoir is clearly trying to communicate how Clea will destroy herself if she doesn't learn to share her burden. There's another interpretation of the Hauler that I'll come back to along with the rest of the Axons, but for now I'd actually like to take a moment to talk about Clea herself. There's this notion amongst some people that Clea doesn't care about the canvas or even the conflict within it, and at first glance this does seem to be the case. She brushes the entire conflict off as unimportant, treats her parents like foolish children throwing a tantrum while she deals with the important issues, and makes it very clear from the moment you encounter her echo within the Forgotten Battlefield that she doesn't even consider the expeditioners worth acknowledging, only responding when Maelle approaches her. She's also characterized by violence, creating the perfect killing machines in the Nevrons, calling the combat trials in the Endless Tower a game, and, like I said, you find her echo standing in the Forgotten Battlefield, surrounded by the corpses of all the people killed by her creations. Hell, she's waging a war against the writers, and painters don't seem to have any real power outside of their canvases, so you kind of have to assume she's just like shooting people or something, with an actual gun. But I think she does care about the canvas. I don't think she wants it destroyed at all, and I think she's actually incredibly angry about what's happening inside. In fact, I think that Clea's role in the story is largely defined by her anger, because while Aline is lost in denial, Verso is defined by depression, and Maelle is clearly meant to represent the bargaining stage, or acceptance, depending on your interpretation. I think Clea is meant to display the anger stage of the cycle of grief. She comes off as very calm about it, but I can't look at the way she talks about her parents' fight in the canvas and not hear the dangerous levels of anger she barely seems to be holding back.
They've spent longer than this in other canvases. It's not that dire. Yes, I know. Maman's been in there for quite a while already, and Renoir is wasting time in there, trying to help someone who doesn't want his help. We have more urgent matters to attend to.
And of course, why wouldn't she be angry? This was her canvas too. It was the place she spent her time with Verso and the Gestrels and Esquier and Francois. She may have left it behind in adulthood, but that doesn't mean it didn't mean anything to her. She spent her childhood making the world what it was with her brother, and now her parents have torn it apart and sullied it with artwork of their own, with creations that were never meant to exist within that world. Her parents were never even meant to exist within that world, but they've taken it over, scrolled across it, and rent it asunder all the same. And honestly, I think this is why Clea seems to take such offense at the versions of her that her parents have painted. Why she directs Simon to destroy the Hauler and inflicts an especially cruel fate on the copy her mother made of her. Because this is her world filled with her memories of Verso, and she's already represented within it, in part by having helped paint it, but also in her echoes and within the Lady of Sap. And speaking of the Lady of Sap, I think this is what reveals her anger and motivations the most. Within Falling Leaves, you can find an echo of Verso who wants to know why Clea keeps killing the expeditioners with her Nevrons, and her response is, I do it for him, I do it for us, to respect what he created, what we created. I think Clea sees the expeditioners and the Axons in all of her parents' creations as disrespectful to what they had, which is why she doesn't care about killing them. She's so angry that what she had with Verso is being tainted and destroyed, and she wants it to stop. But she's also preoccupied with fighting the writers, in taking revenge on the source of all this pain and anger. And the real world takes priority for her. She doesn't want the canvas to be destroyed, but she's burdened by her responsibility, even more so now that her parents aren't upholding theirs. She wants them out, and making her Nevrons to aid Renoir is the most efficient way to get that to happen. So she does just that. And I think this is also why she doesn't mind Maelle staying in the painting. Maelle may not technically belong there either, and neither do her friends, but Maelle loves the world of the painting as much as Clea and Verso did. She loved the Gestrels and the Grandees, and the citizens of Lumiere may not belong, but if they're not keeping her parents there, then they're ultimately harmless, and they make Maelle happy so they can stay. The final detail that points to the fact that Clea actually does care about the painted world, and this is something that was actually brought up in a Tumblr post by Ryuto12 Gaming that I'll link to down below, is that she designed the Nevrons to belong in it. Clea could have easily just made a soulless uniform army, and it would have debatably been far more efficient, but she didn't. She made creatures that fit into the places you encounter them. She made Stellax for the cold and a serpent for the sea, and Goblu, which grows and tends the flowers in that impossible sea. She made dancers for the woods and chevrons for the cities, and all the fucking mimes just to fuck with you. And she made them to remove that which doesn't belong from the place she put them. Even now, when making her perfect killing machines to tilt the scales in her father's favour, she still takes the time to ensure the world grows a little with their inclusion. I think Clea just cares about the painted world so much, and I pity any writer that ends up on the receiving end of her fury over not just her brother's death and her sister's maiming, but over the disrespect being shown to her childhood labour of love. Can you tell how much I fucking love this game from how long I've spent talking about a character with less screen presence than a dead man? Okay, moving on.
Art can be a window, and art can be a mirror. And great art is both. Son, you'll never be a true artist if there's always a mask between you and the viewer, especially when the viewer is you.
Masks are a reoccurring theme within the world of Clair Obscur, both literal and figurative. Verso as a child was very obviously fascinated by them, considering all of his creations bear them in some capacity. And it's clear that this did not go unnoticed by his father, but Verso also grew into a mask of a different kind, and that would be the mask of a painter. Thanks to the painted Verso, who was made to be a near-perfect copy, we know that despite his talent as a painter, his true passion was the piano. But as the son of Aline Descendre, he was expected to be a painter himself, and it's unlikely that he would have been allowed to pursue another life, so he hid his feelings behind the mask of a good son and a good painter. With the best of intentions, he hid his true self within the lies of what was expected of him, something that obviously came out in his work, if Renoir is to be believed. And that, of course, leads us to his Axon. Visage is an interesting entity, because the entire thing is an elaborate show, a ruse put on to hide the truth. The colossal creature that you fight is, in fact, merely a puppet of the true Axon, the Mask Keeper. And it's quite the effective ruse as well, because upon entering his island, Visage greets the expedition himself, making a show of examining them before backing off. And then, well, the resident dramatic bitch takes the stage.
Right, something feels off.
Despite the parable he's attempting to tell, I think there's a genuine love for his son on display in just how much of a performer the Keeper is. And keep in mind, these are Renoir's words, his interpretations of his son being spoken through his creation. The Keeper says multiple times that we all need masks, that they can illuminate as well as hide. And I think this is his way of hinting at the very nature of the Visage puppet, for it's through traversing the three emotional veils and eliminating the masks there that you actually deprive the Keeper of power when you fight him. Symbolically, you're getting closer to the truth by peeling away layers of performance. I think it's also worth noting that Visage offers the expedition a mask that horrifies Ciel so much she throws it back at him, and this rejection seems to anger him, which makes sense considering the mask is his heart. Ciel is rejecting the very nature of his being.
I think you pissed him off.
Symbolically, it's also a rejection of the parable's lesson, and he probably doesn't like Ciel's refusal to wear a mask at all either. In life, Verso wore a mask out of necessity, and pretty much everyone does this to some extent. We keep parts of ourselves hidden and only present what we believe to be acceptable to the people around us. This is the basis of the idea behind the persona. Verso was expected to be a painter, and so he assumed the role required of him, even if his true desire was to be a pianist. I think Visage is meant to be a warning against being lost in the mask, and how it limits not just yourself, but your ability to connect to and be known by other people. In hiding away your true self for so long, people can only come to know the lie. And that is the lesson of the parable here. This is why the expeditioners must peel back the layers of deception to find the real Axon. Visage is known as he who guards the truth with lies, and he insists on the importance of the mask, of the lies, to the very end, and even tries to force that truth onto the expeditioners. But as I mentioned in the other video, this simply does not work on Ciel. I mean, it doesn't work on Monoko either, but that's because he already has a very nice mask. No, it doesn't work on Ciel because she has no need for a mask. She already knows exactly who she is and what she's about, and she lives that truth regardless of what people seem to think.
This mask can't hurt me. Because it is me.
I think Renoir's greatest wish may have been for his son to be more like Ciel, to be more willing to show his true self and only use the mask as needed. I don't think it's a coincidence that the true Axon is covered in an array of faces, but his actual face is conspicuously absent. Did Renoir ever truly know his son? Did anyone? Was there anyone Verso thought he could simply be himself around, or did the expectations placed upon him meld the mask to his face, never to allow the true man to be seen? It seems rather prescient that they named him what they did, because the Verso is the back of the painting, never seen by the vast majority of people, and often only containing the artist's name, which is, in many cases, their epitaph.
Is she the Axon?
Sirene, she who plays with wonder.
There are a lot of things you can say about Renoir, and there's been a lot of debate surrounding his character in the months since the game's release. But one thing that no one can deny is that he loved his family. And I think that even though his artwork is always multi-layered and meant to teach a lesson, his love always shines through in his depiction, especially when it comes to Sirene, the Axon representing his beloved wife. He bedecks her in jewelry and a beautiful flowing dress. He made her the most colourful and graceful of all the Axons. She's quite literally enchanting. He even painted a grand theatre for her, where visitors watch and become lost in her art, the only place in the entire canvas with architecture like it. Hell, she's the only Axon to have an associated song and not just music. Two of them, in fact. Sirene is called She Who Plays with Wonder, and her powers of mental manipulation aside, you can absolutely see how he brought about the idea in her design alone. And, just as Aline is implied to be the most powerful painter, Sirene is the most dangerous Axon. She drains people of their will to fight, or even continue on, and she does it without even attacking. She's also the enemy that introduces the player to the charm status, which causes the expedition members to turn on each other. Without the anti-charm Picto and Lumina, this fight becomes far more difficult. Hell, she almost manages to take out the expedition the moment they lay their eyes on her, something she's already done to at least one other expedition before.
Lune? What's going on?
I don't know.
She's manipulating your emotions. You have to focus. Remember why you're here. Be careful. They call her She Who Plays with Wonder. But what she really does is play with your head.
However, she's still meant to be a parable, a story told to teach a lesson, and the lesson here is the dangers of escapism. Sirene drains people of their will to go on by trapping them in a fantasy, paralleling the real Aline who would happily die in the canvas with her recreated immortal family. This is why, when finally confronted, she shows them the most fervent desires, because just like Aline, every member of Expedition 33 could be easily trapped in the fantasy of reunion with their loved ones. Even Monoko, who was shown to be completely immune to the manipulations of both Axons before this, is taken in by this most insidious of honey traps. Everyone, that is, except for Verso, an exception that truly infuriates Sirene. As I said in my other video, Verso's greatest wish isn't actually to die, it's for the guilt he feels and his suffering to end. And at this point in the game, he believes that the erasure of the canvas is the only way for that to happen. And this is a notion that Sirene, symbolic of Aline as she is, cannot abide. I think the musical change here is actually really important, because the shift in song isn't just to give a more fitting track for the boss battle, it's also to reflect the change in emotion. Club de Jour is a song that expresses Renoir's love and adoration for his wife. It calls her a marvel, and says how her movements are perfect as she draws, a queen filled with love and beauty. But Pomme d'amour is an immediate shift, referring to her as chained in sorrow, crying out as the dramatic cruelty of her loss ravages her soul, and in turn, she ravages the world. It's a song about a great woman brought low by her loss. It's also worth noting that, for both Sirene and the Reacher, Renoir has painted a representation of himself in as well. For Sirene, it's the Tissier, a being which works endlessly to supply her with fabric and support, while Sirene is the Axon, the whole of the Colosseum is the art piece, and he is there alongside her, to show his wife that he won't ever abandon her, that he'll never rest until he sees her safely from the canvas. This is also how you get the anti-charm, by the way, which seems like a not insignificant detail. Ultimately, however, Renoir's depiction of his wife falls on deaf ears. Aline refuses to acknowledge or even see what he's trying to tell her, and Sirene allows Lune to strike her down. Lune, who's so good at compartmentalizing that she can even overcome the empathic distress that Sirene assaults the expedition with, is so focused on taking down the paintress and proving her worth to the ghosts of her parents, more on that in the other video, that Sirene cannot deny Lune her greatest desire. Ultimately, she who plays with wonder is reduced to her heart, the dress that Renoir filled with his love for his wife, and forged into a weapon by the man himself to pierce the barrier. And Aline, deaf as she is to reason, will be forced from the canvas. Finally, we have the Reacher, which I think is actually the most interesting Axon, at least to talk about. You can't actually go to this Axon until you reach relationship level 5 with Maelle, as Verso will just insist the party not enter the area, which he does to protect his sister who likes to hang out at the very top. And while we've needed to interpret the lesson of each parable so far, we really don't have to here.
What's the lesson with this one?
Hope.
Lizzie. My sister's at the top.
And Papa knows I have vertigo.
The Reacher represents Renoir's hopes for his daughter, that he wants her to fly and reach her limitless potential. And to that end, he's depicted her as the largest Axon of them all, forever growing and reaching towards the sky to claim her piece of it. And to reach her, you must first get to her level, which means traipsing up the endless fucking tower of scaffolding, fighting Orphelin and taking balloon rides to gain access to the highest sections. What's really interesting is that, once again, Renoir has painted a representation of himself into it as a supporter. Whilst most of the Orphelin you find are either fighting each other or trying to tear her scaffolding down.
Are they trying to fix things or break things?
She who grasps the sky. They're jealous. They wish to destroy her work. pull her back to the ground.
Is this part of the parable?
Everything is.
There exists one that simply works, building objects to help her soar.
Vertigo, remember?
Given the context of her having been tricked by the writers and it leading to Verso's death and her disfigurement, I think there's actually a very sweet message being sent here. It doesn't matter if the rest of the world is against you, because you're better than all of them, and I'll always be here to help you fly. And while it's very sweet how much he loves her and wants to help, she says herself that his methods aren't the best. This is actually demonstrated really quite well by the nature of the Reacher when compared to Maelle herself. He wants her to climb ever higher, to fly and claim the stars for herself, but she has vertigo. She can't handle heights, and her father's idea of what is best for her only makes her miserable. And she already knows what it is that will make her happy. The vertigo itself actually parallels how Maelle lacks any confidence or sense of self-worth, comparing herself to her siblings, and we know that, at the very least, she was never as talented at painting as Verso or Clea, as she only ever had one painting that was considered good enough to be hung alongside theirs.
I'm the youngest, which makes everything worse.
Oh, I understand that. Only child.
Yeah, Claire's the oldest. She's just so perfect. So accomplished and talented. Papa's favorite. He's so proud of her. And Verso. Verso could always make Papa laugh. I had so many inside jokes. Then there's me.
And then there's you. The actual favorite. The one he calls his hidden star, but who's too shy and self-conscious to see it.
Yet here I am, messing things up even more.
Look around. He just wants you to fly.
I think what sets the Reacher as a story section apart from the other Axons is that it's the only time we get to see three versions of the same person. Renoir's interpretation, Aline's interpretation, and Maelle herself, who bears witness to her parents' thoughts on her, and it's rather telling just how different she is from the depictions. Despite seemingly being the largest Axon, the true Reacher is this small, fragile thing hidden within a colossal shell, barely bigger than Maelle herself. It looks pained and it only has the one eye, representing Maelle's scarring after the fire. This shows that, even with all his hopes for her, Renoir cannot ignore just how much damage has been done to her life, how much she had stolen from her. In the final confrontation, he tells her things will get better, but his art proves he cannot ignore how miserable she's been left by what happened, just how little of her life there is left for her. Then we have Alicia, Aline's painted counterpoint to Maelle, who we find painting the Reacher at the summit. So the painting is painting a painting of another painting within the painting. This is the single most jarringly and hilariously meta moment in almost any video game ever. Anyway, Alicia is Aline's depiction of her daughter, who has been made to bear the perceived sin of her original in the form of the same scars and inability to properly breathe or talk. Just as the Reacher does with Renoir, this depiction of their daughter reveals quite a bit about Aline, largely her inability to forgive her daughter. Even when creating an ideal family for herself, one that would never die and would love her forever, she still scarred Alicia's face, branding her with a symbol of Verso's death, even though the Verso of the painting is still alive. Even if she consciously knows that her daughter, either version really, didn't actually do anything wrong, I mean Maelle's only crime is being taken advantage of, she cannot subconsciously keep from blaming her, which is actually why I think she begins to burn Maelle when they get to the monolith, and only stops once Verso begins burning too. Because at that point her mind has deteriorated too much to be able to differentiate between her desire to find someone to blame and the reality of who is innocent or not. What's truly interesting about all this, however, is how Maelle reacts to both of her depictions. Clea and Renoir both seem to despise their painted counterparts, Clea especially considering what she did to Aline's version of her, Jesus fuck mothering Christ. But Maelle, perhaps as a result of having been on the receiving end of such attitudes before, shows a great deal of compassion for both of her parents' depictions, even if Alicia ultimately chooses an end over a new beginning.
Go. Claim your piece of sky. We both deserve to fly. Let me give you a new beginning.
While the Reacher is ultimately the result of a grieving father who cannot let go of his little girl and, like I said in the last video, who refuses to see things from her perspective, the love on display is very real and Maelle recognises it, and I think there's something beautiful about Maelle allowing her father's hopes for her to fly free. Before I finish up, there's one last thing I'd like to talk about here, and that's a rather interesting take on the Axons I saw from Tumblr user Email probably, which I'll also link below, and that's the idea that Renoir painted the Axons directly in front of the monolith to express where he and Aline failed in both their relationship and with their children, which I actually really like. Just look at the Hauler, which is hunched over and trying to carry the weight of the world, emblematic of just how much pressure has been placed on Clea, not just as the eldest child, but also as the only one now labouring to hold the family together. Verso was constantly wearing masks and hiding the truth, as they'd created an environment wherein he felt that he couldn't be honest about his feelings and passions. To the point that Renoir has Visage continually going on about how people need masks, to the point that Renoir never truly knew his own son, to the point that it's possible no one knew him. Even the Reacher, which climbs to heights beyond the others and represents his hopes for his daughter, is still built from wood and straw, so easily burnable, because they never gave her the proper structure of support to truly thrive. Even Sirene, as enchanting as she may be, is still a criticism of his wife's behaviour. She simply dances on in perpetuity, lost in her art and dragging other people down without a care or concern. And he loves her, he truly does, but is that love being returned? The Tissio works tirelessly, but it's sequestered away where she never has to see, left to support her without acknowledgement or thanks. And he puts them in front of her, directly in front of the monolith, because she won't see them otherwise. He tells her this himself.
You let her come. You know she's too weak for this. How could you let her take such a risk?
You only care when things are right in front of you.
I think there's merit to this interpretation of the Axons, and honestly, I think it's partially correct. Renoir works in layers of meaning, and two things can be true at once. I think it aligns with the other points I brought up, and I'm glad I found it. The Axons are such fascinating creations because there's so much to interpret and analyze, just like everything else in this game. Experiencing art is collaborative. It's something you do with everyone else who engages with it, especially in games. I'd honestly love to hear your thoughts on the Axons. Tell me your interpretations in the comments. Tell me your favourite and which one was the most fun to face. I love this game so much, and hearing what other people thought of it is always so fun. Anyway, I'd like to finish this up by saying thank you for watching, and a special thank you to my patrons for their support, especially Wisteria, Owen Oofs, Heterophobe49, and Lustrous Lizard. This is the last video I have planned on Clair Obscur for now because, well, I want to get started on reviews for Lost, Soul Aside and Silksong. So I hope you enjoyed watching, and I hope you have a lovely day. Bye for now.